Hi friends, welcome to Sada Learning Hub. You are with me Shadashurao. Today's session we are going to learn session tracking with the URL rewriting. See here, before going to discuss session tracking with URL rewriting, first I am going to discuss about session tracking. When a request is sent from a web browser to a server, the HTTP protocol will do the protocol opens a connection with the server and transfers the data from browser to server. After processing transferring the data from server to browser, finally the protocol closes the connection. After the response to the request is sent to a server to unknown about the client. If a server doesn't remember a client, then the behavior is called a stateless behavior. In the web application, a server has to remember a client data for some period of time. Here, stateful behavior is required. To add the stateful behavior for a web application, then apply the session tracking with mechanism. For example, in online shopping websites, a server has to remember the items selected by a client until a client completes a shopping, so stateful behavior is required. To make a web application has a stateful for each client as a ID and an object should be created at the server. ID is used to identify the one client among the multiple clients unequally. Object is used to store the client data at the server. For the session tracking, a client should be identified and a client data should be remember for some period of time. Identifying a client is called session management and remembering a client data is called state management. The session tracking means session management plus and the session state management. Next, I'm going to discuss about session management, session tracking with URL rewriting. Before discussing the session tracking with URL rewriting, I'm going to discuss about first drawbacks of HTTP session. In the HTTP session techniques also, a container internally creates a cookie and store the session ID and then that cookie will be sent to the browser. If the browser rejects the cookie, then the HTTP session doesn't work properly. In the HTTP session, container creates the cookie and its cookie techniques programmer is to creating the cookies. These are the problems in the HTTP session. In the HTTP session technique also a container internally creates a cookie and stores session ID and then that cookie will be sent it to the browser. If the browser rejects the cookies then HTTP session doesn't work properly. In the HTTP session container creates the cookies and in the cookies techniques programmer is creating the cookies. Now I am going to discuss about session tracking with URL rewriting. In this URL rewriting technique, session ID will be added to the URL of the next resource or the request. The advantages of this technique is if a browser accepts the cookies or rejects the cookies, but still session tracking works properly and correctly. This URL rewriting is completely HTTP session techniques only. But to add the session ID to the URL by calling encode URL method is given. Now, URL rewriting is nothing but the combination of HTTP session plus encode URL method. Now, I'm going to raise a one question on this. While URL rewriting is preferred in the real-time applications, yes, a website runs at a server and it doesn't know whether a browser at a client side is accepting or rejecting the cookies. Even though the cookies are accepted or rejected, but session should work. So URL rewriting is preferred. Next, I'm going to discuss about how can we say that a website is used URL rewriting technique or not. If the session ID is displayed in the address bar, then it is applying URL rewriting. By default, a servlet object is not a thread safe because one servlet object can be shared by the multiple threads. So the modifications done by one thread effectively on the other threads also. To make the servlet object as a thread safe, we have to the two options. The first one is implementing the servlet class from the single thread model of Java X.Servlet package, and the second one is add synchronized blocks in a service method. If we implement the servlet class from the single thread model, the number of servlet objects are increased in server. So the approach 2 is better than the approach 1. Means approach 2 is add a synchronized blocks in a service method. Approach 1 is implementing a servlet class from a single thread model. Next, I'm going to explain a real-time example how servlet session tracking with the URL pattern. I can explain with the example how servlet tracking with the URL pattern. As here, I'm created the two servlets. The first one is URL rewriting servlet 1 and second one is URL rewriting servlet 2. See here, I'm creating a one HTML page, simple HTML page. After that, I'm created a one web.xml file. Whatever you are created servlet, I'm configured in the web.xml file. Now, see here in this URL rewriting HTML page, I'm created the simple username, password, and one submit button. Whenever you are running this one, it will be show username colon text box and the password colon text box and one submit button. Whenever you are clicking on the submit button, it will be called the SRV1. It will be called the SRV1 means it will checks SRV1 is available in the web.xml or not, URL pattern is available in the uh, web.xml or not. If it is available, it will be go match with the servlet name and executes the service method of that particular servlet. Servlet. Now this is my URL rewriting servlet one. It map with this one. Now I'm creating a session object by calling HTTP session is equal to request dot get session. The request dot get session of true. If it is returns to true, it returns to true. It is a new client. It creates a session id and the object session object and return it to the http session. If it is the world client, it returns the world session object. After that, I'm creating a writer object by calling the session dot get writer. After that, whatever you are entered into the text boxes, I am reading that values by using string s1 is equal to request dot get parameter of username and string s2 is equal to request dot get parameter of the password. Now I am setting the attribute into the my session attribute. Session dot set attribute of username and session dot set attribute of pass. Whatever you are getting the username and password, I am put it into the session attribute. Finally, I'm creating a one page, that is the form. In the form, I'm creating the putting it the email, that is the input type is equal text box. In this, see here, I'm using encode URL here. See here, form action is equal to response dot encode URL of SRV2. Whenever you are calling the encode URL, it will be encoded the your URL. Now if you are whenever if you are clicking on the submit button, if you are entering the email and if you are clicking on the submit button, it will come into the here. See here, I'm getting the session object by calling request dot get session. After getting the session object, I'm creating the print writer to write the my response into the browser. That's why I'm creating the print writer object. Now I'm getting the values from the session object by calling session dot. Here I'm giving the hs session object name, session object dot get attribute of user and session object dot get attribute of password. Whatever we are put it into the session object here, here I'm put it into the session object. Sorry, here I'm put it into the session object. After that, in the servlet 2, I'm reading the values. Whatever values are there, I'm getting in the servlet 2. After getting and whatever the email you are entered into the email, I am getting that email. After that, finally I am printed into the display into the browser. Now run, I can show how it will works. Run as run on server. Next, finish. See here, this is my index.html page. I'm creating URL URL rewriting dot HTML page. This is my URL rewriting dot HTML page. This here I'm giving the username and I'm giving the password. I'm clicking on the OK button. Whenever you are clicking on the OK button, it will be redirected into the URL rewriting servlet 2. In this URL, it is asking the email 491 at the rate of gmail.com. I'm entering here. If you see here, I'm encoding my URL at here. If you see here, encode URL, whatever the form action is given, email, I'm encoding the URL at is here. I'm encoding URL at here. After my clicking is see here, if you check this one, http colon / 8000 servlet session tracking shopping cart servlet srt2 j session id is equal to something and email id is equal to something. This is nothing but url rewriting. If you check this one, this is nothing but url rewriting. J session id is equal to something is here now. This is nothing but the url rewriting. This is the way to create this is the way to implement the url rewriting.
Thank you so much watching this video. Hope this lesson helpful to you. Keep watching our lessons. Keep writing to us. Do not forget subscribe our channel Learning Hub because we have many sessions that would help you to develop our skills, and I will be back soon. Till then you take care. Bye bye.